Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. I hope you guys have had a good trading week so far. I'm really excited about tonight's webinar, so I'm looking forward to get started. Feeling much better. Thank you. Feeling a little under the weather, so now I am good to go. So let's go ahead and get started. Tonight, I want to talk to you guys about how to grow your account the low risk way. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Allison Ostrander, and I am the Director of Risk Tolerance, as well as an options specialist here at Simpler Trading. And so just to give you a little bit of background about myself, well, first let's go ahead and dive into an example. This is kind of an example of one of the low risk ways that I like to trade and how I have been able to grow my accounts and lock in profit. So this was from earlier in the year when the market was a lot more volatile, right? I had a beautiful bearish divergent bar, bearish signal that printed on the hourly chart, and we'll talk about what a divergent bar is later on in the webinar. And so I took one of the strategies that I like to use, the profit recycling strategy, and I covered that risk for a minimum $15 profit per contract. So basically what I did with this trade is I took all of my risk off the table. I didn't actually use any of those pesky day trading rules, and I guaranteed myself a minimum, though it was a small one, but a minimum $15 profit per contract. And this trade actually filled rather quickly. I wasn't in it for very long. I think I was in it for like maybe 10 minutes max before it filled. And so I got the quick profit, but most importantly, my risk was covered for the day. And on that same day settlement, I ended up taking a total profit of $420 per contract. So on top of the $15 I was guaranteed, I was able to lock in an additional $405, making it that $420 total. And this was a 381% return on my initial max risk that I had out there. So, you know, this is just a forefront of the strategies and kind of the low risk way that I like to do my trading, and how I'm able to take these trades sometimes just within a few seconds, within a minute of opening them and then locking in a profit like that. So what are we going to talk about on tonight's webinar? Well, you'll discover my kind of introduction to low risk trading. You'll have an introduction for a trading plan for any lifestyle. And trust me when I mean any lifestyle. I'll also talk to you about a trading plan for any size account, as well as my no-brainer setup for taking a trade, as well as my targets and trading plans for 2021. So as I mentioned earlier, right, for those of you who don't know who I am, this is a picture of me prior to giving birth, so I do look a little different. But I started my trading journey fresh out of college with a BFA in theater performance. And to help support myself, I was introduced to the idea of trading actually by my dad. He had done trading. He had done, shares and covered calls and things like that. And he was really diving into his options education. And so he thought it'd be a great way for the three of us kids to kind of learn and be able to kind of be self-independent and not necessarily have to worry about a corporate job or things like that in order to survive out there in the world. And so to me, it sounded much better than waiting tables. It sounded like a good way to be able to maybe even fund some of my theater endeavors. And so I was I was the only one to hop on board. And I started attending online webinars. I started kind of self-teaching. I grew a paper account to show that I kind of had an idea of what I was doing. And then from there, I decided to take some one-on-one coaching. And in my very first live trade, that is when things clicked. And not only did I recoup my coaching fees within the first trade, but I also locked in a profit. And it was at that moment I realized I had discovered a second passion. So trading seemed easy at first, but there was a problem bubbling below the surface. So maybe some of you guys have run into this same issue as well. So it's what I like to call the dark side of trading for my Star Wars and maybe my Mandalorian fans out there. There were a few things that were negative to me in regards to trading when I had started. The first thing was my eyes were glued to my charts and futures long after market close. I was looking at how Asia was opening and closing. I was looking at how Europe was opening. I was trying to figure out how that might affect my trades that I held. And so, of course, because I'm up all night looking at futures and looking at the world market, I ended up with a lack of sleep, right? And partially because I'm stuck glued to my charts. And the other reason why is because I had too many trades on, right? And so I'm so concerned about how those trades are going to do that it just kind of kept me up all night until that next trading day occurred. And of course, you know, with a lack of sleep, your emotions certainly start to guide your trading instead of the technicals. And that's what I was running into. And then of course, right, when your emotions are guiding your trading, you start to run into hopium, where you hope that the trade's going to work out rather than knowing if it will or not. And then turn, of course, you know, when you start to hope and you let your emotions guide and you're not following your trading plans or the technicals, that's when you end up with those staggering losses. So all of these issues I realized stemmed from capital risk. And when I took that step back, I realized that was my main source of where all my emotions were feeding into that dark side of trading. And in turn, it wasn't just capital risk. It was what my own personal risk tolerance was. So the lack of understanding capital risk fed into all my negative thoughts about trading, and it fed into that dark side. And this, of course, right, once you start to have those losses, it's easy to have that start to just build up, right? It's almost like a snowball rolling down a hill where it just keeps piling on top of each other. And of course, you know, the more you start losing, the more your emotions start guiding your trading, and it, of course, leads to those further losses. So once I took that step back and realized risk was my issue, it became my whole focus around trading. It became my main focus, and every trade I took, I constantly was analyzing my risk versus reward, both on the individual trade as well as what that was going to do for my overall account. And anytime I look at trading now or develop a new strategy, risk is always 100% my guiding focus, because I never want to fall back into that dark side of trading. So the first step to low risk trading, right? The very first thing I did after I realized that dark side of trading is started to develop my profit recycling strategy. And this is a way to intraday trade options without necessarily day trading. So this focus on risk led me to my profit recycling strategy. I created this strategy because I struggled with risk and my own personal risk tolerance in the past. And at the same time, I am a day trader at heart, which was great when I was trading large accounts, right? It's certainly those above 25,000. But when I managed the smaller accounts, it left me with a measly 3 trades per week, right? And for those of you who ever traded large accounts and then went to trade a small account, you know that frustration of not being able to take advantage of those intraday moves, not having the freedom to just be able to jump in and out of a trade when you want to, right? Or if you make a mistake, oh, that's the worst. And then you have to all of a sudden be mindful of how many day trades you have left for the week before your account gets flagged. And so I knew there had to be a better way to grow these smaller accounts while still being mindful of my risk tolerance and still being within my own personal plan for risk. So that's where the profit recycling strategy came in. And when using the strategy, I was able to grow an account from 10,000 to over 45,000 in just under 3 months. And the best part about that growth is that I was never fully invested in my account. When the account started to get above 35,000, the most risk I ever had out there when it got that high was about 7,000 at one time. So it just goes to show you that I never had that much capital out there in general when growing it. I was able to still grow it and compound it successfully. And I was able to do that without letting that dark side of trading really affect or cause the, bad emotions, I guess you could say, to lead to those losses, right? I was able to stick with my plan because of it. And so in growing this account, a lot of these trades did not have overnight risk. This means my risk was typically covered within the same day and sometimes was only out there for seconds at a time, right? That first trade, like we talked about, that first example, I think I was only in it maybe 10 minutes before I got my cover. And for some of you guys who have been in the options room, who have heard me talk about this strategy before, you might have seen me pull up the positions page and the order page and show you that, yes, here is my original entry. And literally a minute later, here's my fill on already covering my risk. And so these trades were done by taking advantage of intraday moves while avoiding those pesky day trading rules. That was the best part, is I never had to technically use my 3-day trades in order to take advantage of the intraday moves like we saw earlier this year and be able to lock in profits. So it felt like I had unlocked a whole new level when trading with the profit recycling strategy, right? When you get into a game, especially when you're young for the first time and you're playing something like Mario, and then you play the level like Super Mario 3, you think you're good, and then all of a sudden a whole new world appears, and you're like, oh my God, I didn't even think the game continued like this, right? And that's what it felt like to me with my trading whenever I unlocked this strategy. And there was nothing that was going to slow me down from taking these profits with low risk. And for a while, this was a very accurate statement, right? This was my trading plan. This was my bread and butter. But just like in our trading journey, our life also brings about new paths to explore. So this is what I want to lead into trading for any lifestyle. And in particular, I want to discuss my overnight profit strategy. So I recently made the wonderful and maddening decision, as you might hear, to have 2 kids born less than a year apart. And after my first daughter, and with another one on the way, or as you can hear now, he is here, I felt that I had started to get into a good groove of work and family life balance. And I thought this new flow would continue to last, right? I thought I'd be in the office doing this. Yeah, exactly. Irish twins, right? But then the coronavirus hit, right? And so now not only was it a new way of life for me, but it was a new way of life for everyone else. And not only did the market start to plummet earlier this year, but stay-at-home orders were issued. And I found myself once again at home trying to balance work and trading, and a cutie who thankfully is asleep right now proved that she liked to run the show. And of course, another one who is not asleep. But I wasn't too worried, right? I wasn't too worried about not being able to trade. And the reason why is because when I was on my first maternity leave with my daughter, I had developed a strategy that I knew had an excellent win rate and required almost no time in front of the computer. And so this was my overnight profit strategy. And this is a great strategy for those of us with very limited time to pay attention to charts and market, right? So if you're like me, you can't necessarily sit in front of the computer like you want to. This strategy allows me to create profits, even though I can't necessarily take advantage of some of those intraday moves like I like to. And even though I couldn't lock in profits the same day, I typically would not hold this trade longer than 3 days when taking the signal off the daily chart, right? So for me, right, 3 days sometimes seems like a very long time to hold a trade when I was so used to intraday trading. But you can tell you're really not in it for very long. Your risk still isn't out for weeks or months at a time necessarily if you're taking the signal off the daily chart. It's a very quick trade. And so it really worked for the lifestyle that I found myself into. And no, pregnancy is not required, Gary. We'll talk about that, but definitely not. So here's an example of the overnight profit strategy, right? Here's a recent one actually, and this one's off the weekly chart. So typically off the weekly chart, I'll give myself 3 weeks for the signal to follow through. But with the overnight profit strategy, I still find myself oftentimes taking profit the next trading day. In this case, holding the trade over the weekend and then taking the profits on Monday. And so I actually opened 2 different trades and 2 different accounts. One was a smaller account, one was slightly larger. And so in the smaller account, I took a $55 profit. It was 100% return on my risk. And in the second account, I took a 103 profit. It was an 80% return on my risk. So as you can see, whether you're trading with a small account, a super small account, or you're trading with even a slightly larger account, right? Depending on the strategies, you can still find ways to be able to take and lock in profits overall and do so in a very short amount of time. So once again, I kept in mind my risk by using vertical spreads to help reduce capital being held overnight. And I was able to stay within my low risk tolerance and not let that dark side of trading try to creep in. So using this strategy, I typically don't start searching for trades until the last hour of market. And I don't typically place them until the last 30 minutes of market close because I want to make sure the signal is valid. And what that allows is it allows for freedom in the rest of my day, right? So like I said, you don't need to be pregnant in order to trade these strategies or have a little one crying in the background, right? Instead, you can be in retirement. 1 second, guys, I apologize. So using this strategy, like I said, you can be in semi-retirement mode. Oh. There we go. You can be in semi-retirement mode, out on the golf course, perhaps. 1 second, I apologize. Okay, well, sorry about that, guys. I appreciate it. So, if you're like me, right, and you're having to juggle 2 kids, or if you are out on the golf course, you don't really want to be in front of your computer all day. I completely understand that. And this is a great strategy to be able to implement and do all the things that you want to do in life, or take care of the things, or juggle work, juggle that family life balance, and still be an active trader throughout the day. So after market close with this strategy, I would typically look to place my good till cancel order. And as the name implies, most of the time this trade was held from just one market day into the next, allowing for quick profits without capital being out there for very long. So here's another example of the overnight profit strategy, this time from the daily chart on Netflix. Once again, a recent trade, I took it off the bullish signal that printed on the 13th. Used the overnight profit strategy, closed it out the next morning for a 108 profit per contract. It was a 63% return on my risk. And that was my good till cancel. I usually, will oftentimes set my good till cancel for about $100 profit per contract, depending on the type of trade or strategy I'm in. And this one itself was able to trigger that next morning. I was able to instantly close it out and recycle that capital back into my account. So this is the perfect strategy, like I said, for people who work during market hours, or like me, like you just heard now, right? Juggling kids and family, or a combo of both. Or as I mentioned, maybe you're out on the golf course. You want to not sit in front of your computer all day, or maybe you're at the beach, or you're out for a walk and you want to do things out in the real world. Well, this is a great strategy to be able to do and still be an active trader. So it's for those who want to do other things with their day instead of staring at the computer, and yet still make profits as if they were sitting there all day long. So back to the low risk, as I mentioned earlier, I am an intraday trader at heart. And sometimes at the market open, when the house is calm before the storm, right? Or during the beautiful moment that is called nap time, where they're both nicely asleep and it's not one up or the other up, I found myself looking at intraday charts and wanting to take a move. However, you can imagine just how fickle nap time it can be, right? For those of you who have ever had or have kids, nap time is a blessing and a curse in disguise, depending on how long it lasts. And I just didn't have the luxury to sit in front of my charts as I used to follow through on the signaled entry, as well as when I would look to cover it or exit using that original profit recycling strategy. And so this is where the profit recycling 2.0 strategy came in. It's for the busy intraday trader like myself, and it's a time-efficient way to intraday trade options. So this option strategy is primarily used to intraday trade without having to use any of those pesky day trading rules, right? So once again, it still bypasses and avoids those. You're able to trade this in accounts under 25,000 and still take advantage of those intraday moves. However, unlike the normal intraday trading, which causes you to stay at your computer watching the charts, this new take allows for more consistent follow through on a simple signal. And we'll talk about that here in a bit. The profit recycling 2.0 strategy is an update to the original one, where capital risk is much more controlled going into the trade. I knew that if I wanted to attempt intraday style trading again, at least in these few years until my kids go to school, if school is, a thing again where they actually go inside a building, I would have to find a way that protects against theta decay, right? And still keeps my risk low. That's always at the forefront of my trading, and can follow through on the signal even if I'm not directly in front of my charts. So here's an example of that profit recycling 2.0 strategy. This one was also done earlier in the year whenever we had a bit more volatility. So I saw a great signal here, right, for a bearish signal to take a move lower. I was able to instantly, once again, rather quickly using this strategy, cover my risk for a minimum 105 profit per contract. And then I ended up closing it the next day for a total of $167 of profit per contract. So on top of the 105 that was guaranteed, right? That was my worst case scenario on the trade once my risk was covered. Worst case was 105. The next day, I was able to add $62 of additional profit to that to lock in 167 profits per contract. So it was a 63% return on my initial max risk that I had out there. More importantly, I was not having to hold that risk out on the table overnight. I was able to lock it in and then also give myself kind of a free bonus trade to take an additional profit from. So this new way of looking at intraday trading allows me to become more flexible with my time while still taking trades from as small as an intraday time frame, right? So I can certainly use this strategy on daily and weekly charts. For those of you who were with me in the class, y'all know that's what we did. We actually had a great track record with that class. We had, I think, 14 wins and 1 loss out of all the trades that we did during the live trading during that time. So it was a great track record. And the benefit of both the profit recycling strategies, both the original one and the 2.0, is that not only do you lock in a profit and recycle that capital risk back into your account, usually, especially if it's on the intraday charts within the same day, but you also free up a zero risk trade, right? That's kind of what I was mentioning earlier, that bonus trade. And so what I mean by a zero risk is that all the original capital, once the trade is covered, all the original capital is ideally protected back into your account, right? That's the goal with this strategy. However, with this free trade, it gives you a chance to potentially take an additional profit. So just like with that last example, right, where I guaranteed the 105 and then took an additional $62 of profit, that's exactly what we see here. So this means the initial profit I locked in is the worst case scenario I am taking for this trade. So here's another example of this profit recycling 2.0 strategy. There was a bullish signal on the 9th. I took a profit recycling trade. This is off Amazon, technically from the weekly chart, but I still profit recycled the trade. I was able to lock in a 350 minimum profit per contract, which was a 431 total profit per contract once the trade was closed. So once again, the minimum worst case scenario on this trade was $350. With the bonus trade, I was able to lock in an additional $81 to create a total profit of $431, which was that 132% return on the initial risk that I had out there. So this toolbox of strategies are great solo, but are also wonderful when combined for growing your account. And some might be asking, well, how big of an account do I need to be successful? I think I saw a few guys ask that in the chat. And the answer is almost any account size will do. So this is where I'm going to talk a little bit about my $500 challenge. Some of you guys might have heard about this whenever I was posting the trades to the room. I talked about it on Twitter and on the Twitch platform for those of you who are following me on there. And so the easy part about trading, of course, is when you're working up into a larger account, is that you can still take the same trades, right, that you initially took once your account starts to grow. And all you have to do is increase the contract amount to fit your new risk tolerance, right? So trading on a larger account is pretty simple, especially if you're growing the account from small to large. All you have to do is adjust your contract to size to fit whatever your new risk tolerance is for the amount that's in the account. However, what about if a trader starts with a small account, right? How small can that account be to still be successful to grow it? Well, like I mentioned, as some of you guys know, before taking maternity leave, the second time around, I decided to grow an account starting with only $500 of capital risk. And I wanted to see if I could grow it within a month's time while still being mindful of the actual capital. So I know that sounds silly, right? $500 can easily be taken up by a one contract trade. So how am I going to be mindful of risk? Well, I adapted what my 25% rule is, which is what helps me overall just with my investment and risk tolerance. And so I took my 25% rule and I adjusted it for the small account. So that way, when I took my toolbox of strategies, I had my risk in mind, and then I went to work and starting to grow it. And starting with such a small amount meant that I was extremely cautious about capital, and I kept my trades limited so they could fit within the guidelines. And let me just say, with this $500 challenge, I still never invested the full $500 of capital. I always had cash in the bank, right, in the brokerage platform, not invested in case something happened. So the results of the first challenge is, after taking into consideration the commission, right, and commission costs, I was just a few dollars shy of 100% return on the account. So very happy with that, to be able to be so mindful of my risks and grow it to almost have a full net $500 right on top of the $500 the account that I started with. So to make sure it wasn't just a fluke, I immediately jumped into a new challenge the next month. So in the next $500 challenge, I was only able to keep it up for roughly 3 weeks, because that 4th week I had to start considering the next delivery date. He looked like he was coming early, so I wanted to be mindful of not being in a lot of trades in case he decided to come earlier than expected. And so even with just the 3 weeks, the limited trades, still keeping my risks small and mindful, I was able to lock in a 62% growth in that account value. So this shows that even with a super small capital amount, using this toolbox of strategies can help in successfully growing the account while being mindful of capital risk. So here's an actual view of that account and that account statement. It shows 1,000 in there right now. Technically, the account always had 1,000 in it, but I only decided to risk 500 of that. And then even then with the 500, I never fully invested the 500 whenever I was doing the challenge. But you can see here, total profits and loss between the two challenges was $953. When I take into consideration the commissions, which is around $144, I ended up with $808 of profit. And that's basically 161% return on the $500 of risk in roughly 2 months. And keep in mind, it was never that full $500 of capital out there, right? I always had some money in the bank. So to be able to have that kind of return with such a small account shows you how this toolbox of strategies can still be beneficial no matter what account size you might be trading out of. So here's another example, a recent one off SPX off the weekly chart, where I did a profit recycling trade. I took a $50 minimum profit per contract. And the next day, I was able to close it out for an additional $55 of profit, right, from that bonus trade. So in total, I locked in a 105 total profit, which was a 41% return on risk. So the signals. So now that we have the toolbox of strategies that can help grow the account of any size, now we need to know when to implement such trades. And this is where my dynamic duo of indicators take center stage. So one of the main keys to these strategies being successful is from the divergent bar indicator and the compound breakout tool, right? My dynamic duo of indicators. So as a person travels along their trading journey, they discover new ways to identify setups on the charts, right? And the same thing is true for myself. One of the new ways I found to identify the setups is with the divergent bar indicator, as I like to call my Batman of the two indicators. And to identify a proper divergent bar, it takes time to do the math. The problems that I ran into is that it took too long for me to do the math. So it kept me from being able to really go through my entire watch list to find some setups rather quickly. And of course, the other issue is when doing math by hand, I'm subjected to human error, and being dyslexic myself, it's not too hard for me to just flip around a number when I'm trying to do the calculations quickly and then find myself thinking I have a valid signal, jumping into a trade, and then going back and saying, oh no, I did not have a valid signal. I did my math wrong, right? So that was one of the issues I was running into. The Robin of the two indicators is the compound breakout tool. And this one is actually combined of multiple signals that I look at involving 3 separate studies: the stochastics full, the MACD histogram, and several different simple moving averages. So all 3 studies for the compound breakout tool can be great to look at, but can sometimes lead to false signals individually. So when I looked at all 3 indicators combined, it helped clear up the false signals, but still created cluttered chaos on my charts. So I knew there had to be a simpler way to view these signals. I knew there had to be a simpler way to read these indicators. And when I joined Simpler Trading, I was introduced to the master inventor of indicators, Mr. Eric Purdy, right? The director of quantitative strategies here at Simpler Trading. And I am so thankful to Eric. So I was told he was the one to go to kind of ask about indicators if I had any that I potentially needed. And I found myself at Eric's doorstep hoping he could work his magic so that I could identify a divergent bar with a quick glance at the chart. And I could combine all the signals and the studies that I like to create that compound breakout tool so I could leave my charts to be less cluttered and a little bit more organized. So I explained to Eric the criteria and math needed to determine both individual indicators, and he was able to create the divergent bar indicator and the compound breakout tool. And this dynamic duo of indicators is what I use to trade the profit recycling 2.0 strategy mainly, but I also now am using it both with the overnight profit strategy and the original one because it's just a great signal. I find myself actually using it in the majority of the trades that I take now. And so what does the indicator do? Well, the divergent bar indicator is used to help determine whether the next bar or two, right, will create a higher high or not compared to the current bar. And it can also help determine whether or not the next bar or two will create a lower low compared to the current bar. What does the compound breakout tool do? Well, the compound breakout tool is used to help determine the type of trend, bearish, bullish, or consolidating. And the indicator can also be used to identify the start as well as the potential end of that trend. So when combined, these can be for a really great setup. So here, for example, we can see on the compound breakout tool down here, we had 2 of the 3 lines start to print a green box and then followed up with green dots. That is a valid bullish signal on the compound breakout tool. And so when I pair that with a bullish divergent bar, which are these light, almost white colored bars, are kind of technically like a light green blue. But when I pair that with the compound breakout tool, that is a great way to look at a potential trade entry for a bullish setup. So here, for example, we had a bullish divergent bar that followed through immediately the next day with a higher high. Here was a bullish divergent bar, next day followed through with a higher high. Here was a bullish divergent bar, next day was technically a higher high. You can see though the trend itself continued to the upside. Here was another bullish divergent bar, followed through the next trading day with a higher high. All that time, the signal on the compound breakout tool is still valid for a bullish trend. So what time frame? Well, the divergent bar indicator and compound breakout tool can technically be used for any time frame. It can be used from an intraday time frame all the way up to a monthly time frame. I will note on the divergent bar indicator, I typically don't go below a 30-minute chart using that indicator just because it can get a little noisy below that level. The compound breakout tool I'll definitely use on the 5 and 10-minute chart, but as you know, and can see here, right, especially if you followed me along in the room and stuff, you know that I use those on my intraday timeframes when looking at SPX or, you know, whatever symbol we're looking at the time, as well as with the longer ones. So what type of bar? Well, the divergent bar indicator, because it prints on the bar itself, can technically be used with any bar type. I personally like the standard bar. I know a lot of you guys like the candlestick bar. It will work with that as well. For those of you who have the grab candles or the 10x bars, right? One way that you can still use both the signals, if you find that to be valid for yourself, is you can put your charts up in a grid format, right? So in one of the charts, you have your grab candles, for example, and on the other chart, you have your divergent bar. That's the workaround that I found for myself, and I know a lot of other traders have found in the room whenever using the divergent bar indicator. So the best part about this divergent bar and compound breakout tool indicator is once you upload it, there's nothing else you need to change except the color if you choose to. Eric has done an excellent job creating these indicators. So once it is added to your charts, you are good to go. So here's some more examples of this toolbox of strategies that I use. A lot of these are more recent. So here's a bullish signal that printed on the 22nd. I profit recycled the trade the next day on the 23rd. And took a minimum $375 profit per contract, which was a 65% return on risk. And what I did here on Match is I set myself up for a free bonus trade to hold through earnings, right? And so I love doing lotto trades around earnings announcement, but it's even better when I can put on a lotto trade like this that has zero capital risk, right? Where the worst case scenario on this trade is I'm walking away with $375. And so that's exactly what I set up here. And on this trade here, right, I didn't take that additional profit. My Match moved to the upside beautifully. My trade at the time, it ended up turning itself into a butterfly. It went completely in the money. So, you know, I wasn't able to take that additional bonus profit, but it was no skin off my back because I still was walking away with the $375 minimum profit that I took to begin with. Here was one on plug. Similar situation for those of you who were in the options room during that time, right? You might have taken the trade and followed along with me, but this was a bullish signal on the 4th. We profit recycled the trade on the 5th. I profit recycled one of the 2 contracts I held on this trade. And so for this trade, I took a 103 minimum profit. It was a 64% minimum return on risk. And once again, as you can see, the earnings announcement was right around the corner. Now with plug, right, it was a similar situation with match. I wasn't able to take an additional profit off the table, but very happy to take the profit in general the first time and not have that risk out there through the announcement itself. And as you can see, we had a beautiful bullish divergent bar and a beautiful signal in the compound breakout tool. So plug with the second contract, I used the overnight profit strategy. This one I could have closed out the next day, but I held it one more day and closed it out the 6th. We took 148 profit per contract. It was a 91% return on that capital risk. And once again, you know, as we talked about, great signal with the dynamic duo of indicators. Here on Tesla, similar situation, great signal for entry. Took the bullish divergent bar, printed on the 13th, did the overnight profit strategy, closed it out the 14th. In one of the accounts, I took a $102 profit per contract. It was a 59% return on risk in that account. And the slightly larger account, I took a 103 profit per contract, which was a 44% return on risk. But very happy to take those profits quickly off the table the next day. Starbucks, another example. This one had a great signal both on the daily and the weekly time frame. So on the daily chart on that Friday, I typically don't take this signal on a Friday just off the divergent bar, but this was a really nice setup and the weekly was in agreement with it. So I decided to take the trade. Very happy I did. But you can see here on the daily chart, dynamic duo was in agreement. We had the divergent bar, we had the compound breakout tool, and we had a daily squeeze. Love seeing that. On the weekly chart, we just had the divergent bar more in our agreement. But I opened it that Friday, closed it Monday, right? So only held it over the weekend, that risk, and took a 326 profit per contract when that squeeze fired to the upside on Monday, and it was 133% return on risk overall. Here's Zen, right? Another recent example. I took this trade on the 10th, did the overnight profit strategy, closed it out on the 11th for a quick $88 profit per contract on that trade. Once again, great signal with bullish divergent bars here and a bullish signal on the compound breakout tool. So, and then I believe this is the last one here, but match, this was also a recent one off the weekly chart. This wasn't actually printed after the earnings announcement came out. On the weekly, it made a great bullish signal. It actually had, at the end of the week, it printed a valid technical bullish signal on the compound breakout tool. Technically, it looks like it started to cancel out the next week, right, when I took this snapshot. But that valid signal with both of those combined still allowed me to follow through with that higher high, and in turn allowed me to take that quick $52 profit per contract, which was a 44% return on the risk. So what's next? Well, blowing out your account can be frustrating and disheartening. I have certainly been there myself, right? That's what leads into the dark side of trading. That's what had me focus on risk to begin with when I first started my trading journey. And so I've been there myself, and I know how emotional and stressful that can be. And of course, in the current work from home environment, even the most seasoned traders like myself, right, can still have problems with juggling responsibilities and babies and bottles and whatever else and work, right, and still growing their accounts. And of course, everyone can use some extra clarification on the chart and narrowing down those great entries and exits. So I know going into the end of 2020, I think all of us are ready for this year to be done. And I certainly want to get a fresh start going to 2021. And keeping my risk at the forefront of my trading like I always do, and keeping my toolbox by my side with my dynamic duo ready to pounce, I am ready to start growing my accounts once more. So does player 2 want to enter the game, right? Do you guys want to join with me on this trading journey that is life? So I'm very excited to introduce my Profit Recycling Mastery. I know quite a few of you guys have been asking me since my very first Profit Recycling class if I was ever going to do something like this. And so I'm excited to finally get started on this journey next year, and I hope you guys are willing to join me. So who is this program for? Well, the goal of the Profit Recycling Mastery is to target short-term moves without triggering that dreaded 25K day trading rule limitation, right? But it's also a strategy that can be implemented with both swing style trades as well as intraday moves within the market. And it is ideal for traders who seek consistent weekly gains with limited time and capital investment. So if you've ever struggled like risk like I have, right? Or you want to learn about these strategies maybe before buying the class, right? You want to teach yourself how to fish. Maybe you try the fish first. You want that salmon to be cooked and prepped for you before you try and go out fishing for yourself. Well, this is a great way to do it because you're able to look over my shoulder. You're able to, ask questions within the room. We'll have the live trading day to where you can ask in real time and see why I might be choosing a particular signal and setup compared to another one. And it's a great way to get real-time trade ideas. So, some people, this isn't, the first time that I've talked about these strategies. I know some of you guys have taken my classes in the past or maybe have seen them in the store. So it's not just me that has been able to grow my account successfully using these indicators and using these strategies, right? Others have been able to do so as well. So about the live trading sessions, right? Once a month, the first Wednesday of every month from 1 to 3 p.m., we'll have a live trading day. I really hope to be able to take some intraday trades during that time, right? So we can all follow along in real time when they fill rather quickly, especially if it's a volatile market day that day. That'll be quite fun to do. But you'll also be able to follow along with me whenever we're doing overnight profit strategy trades, right? Or maybe something on a longer time frame. So this is a great time that during the live trading sessions, you can see and hear me go through the charts and say, okay, this is why I like this one compared to another setup. This is why I wouldn't take this setup. This is why I would. And so you can kind of start to understand my psychology personally on why I choose a certain trade setup over another one, right? So it's a great way to kind of understand it for yourself for when you decide to implement the strategies on your own. So this is the quarterly and annual membership. This is limited early bird pricing. I know the pricing is going to go up later next year. So if you just want to try it out to begin with, right, it's only $397 for the first quarter. So for several months, you can be a part of the program. Or if you know that this is something you want to follow along with for the entire year, certainly the annual membership at $1297 is going to give you that discount. And like I said, both of these are technically discounted rates to be able to join in on. But the benefit here, right, I can't guarantee that we'll make profits, right? I can't guarantee that we'll win. That's obviously my goal because I'm trading real money just like you guys. I do not want to lose my money. But just as an example, right, if we did this like a $500 challenge for the month and it followed along with the same, rate of success as the last two, we can easily look to make up just the quarterly membership fee within maybe one of the months and then look to start profits after that. And that's if you're starting with a really small account like $500, right? If you bump that up for a risk tolerance of a $5,000 account, then, ideally we'll definitely be making up these membership fees and be locking in profits along the way. Like I said, I can't guarantee anything, but I certainly want to make those profits for myself. And I hope to be able to make those profits for you guys as well. So what does this mastery program include? Well, of course, it includes the real live trading, right? That once a month live trading will be hopped on with, but it'll also include real-time trade alerts, right? I'm not just going to send out my trades only during the live trading sessions. I'll be looking at it every week. I'll be sending out trade alerts every week on trades that I'm getting into my accounts using this toolbox of strategies that you guys can choose to follow along with. If you're out on the golf course, right, or you're juggling kids like I am, and you don't have time sitting in front of your computer, as long as you have a smart device, you can get the notifications pushed right to you. And of course, if your brokerage platform also has an app, you can find yourself on the golf course, putting on that trade at the same time, and then going on to the next hole to try and make that hole in one, right? You'll also have access to my trade spreadsheet. So you can see all the trades that I'm taking. You can see if we're profit recycling them, if we're closing them out, what are we closing them out for? Was it a profit or loss, right? Certainly we can talk about the management. If we had to go into management of one of these trades, what is that going to look like and do? And so you'll have access to that spreadsheet to be able to see it. So what else to expect, right? Well, with the mastery program, like I mentioned earlier, you can watch over my shoulder as I scan through trade setups, understand why I might lean towards one setup versus another to jump into, catch up once a month for some live trading where we can discuss in real time with y'all as we look through setups. I love answering y'all's questions. Y'all know me, especially if you're in the training room in the morning, right? I love being able to really dive in and answer your questions. And in the main options room, it gets hard to do that because we're so focused on charts. And certainly we'll be focused on trades here, but once again, it's a great place to really just get that one-on-one question answered. And maybe it's a question somebody else asked, but it's the same question you had to really dive in So that way you guys can have the understanding, right? I want to teach y'all how to fish, and I also want to give you some fish. So I'll give you guys some trade alerts on stuff that I'm looking at entering. But hopefully through this mastery, you can also start to teach yourself how to fish and how to implement these trades on your own so that you don't always need me to be right there in order to enter the trades too, right? So on top of watching over my shoulder, you will also have access to my personal watch list, right? The watch list that I run all my scans off of, which the divergent bar indicator and technically the compound breakout tool both have scans that can be used on Thinkorswim. Personally, I mainly just use the divergent bar indicator for the scans, and then I just confirm whenever I pull up that chart whether or not the compound breakout tool, right, is in line with it. But you'll have access to my personal watch list so you can run the scans yourself and during your time. You can also choose to follow along with the same trades that I'm placing in my own accounts. And like I said, all the trade alerts will be sent through the room. So if you're, sitting at your computer, you have the room open, you'll get them automatically pulled up there. If you have a smartphone and you have our trading app, you'll certainly get the push notifications to your phone as well. So that way you never miss a trade action that I'm taking. And for traders who like longer term setups, I know I personally like long-term setups sometimes. There will also be a bi-weekly video that I put out every Thursday to show what symbols I'm keeping an eye out for on a Friday entry. So these trades will be based off more the weekly and monthly timeframes. But it's a great way to either maybe do an overnight profit strategy and still, potentially take that profit off the next weekend, over the weekend and off on Monday. But it will also be great for those of you who maybe are looking for entries to jump into shares, right? Or maybe you have shares and you're debating to yourself, well, do I need to do covered calls or not? And maybe it pops up on my biweekly video list to give you an idea of, okay, no, Allison actually really likes this to the upside. I think I'll maybe jump into some more shares or something like that and play it higher. And so for those of you who like the longer term setups or maybe are also trying to grow an account, I know I'm trying to put out shares in a smaller account for my kids so that way they have something in the future as well. These videos will be great to be able to do that and take some signals off of a longer term service or a longer term technical signal off the charts, right? And of course, there's even more. So you can understand what market environments have leaning maybe towards a specific strategy versus another and why, right? Profit recycling strategies are great in volatile markets like we saw earlier this year. The overnight profit strategy could work great in those environments as well, but they also work great in consolidating markets. So next year, as we fluctuate from potentially one type of market trend to the next, you can see which strategy I'm kind of leaning a bit more towards and understand why. And if 2021 is anything like 2020, then we are sure to see some interesting volatility and market moves. So like I said, it's not just me who's taken these trades and have been successful or have used these indicators here. Just, some people in the room who, through their kind words, and also very happy that they've been able to take profits and find a low stress way to trade themselves, right? I know quite a few of you guys who have taken my classes in the past who have also struggled with risk, have also blown out accounts, right? I've done one-on-one coaching where it's just heartbreaking to hear people who had a large account and were never mindful of risk, much like I wasn't at the start of my trading either, and have just completely overinvested in their accounts. And now they're stuck with basically nothing that they can do, right? So that's why I created these strategies, to help keep people and keep traders from falling into that trap that so many people do. And, and also the indicators, right? I know for people who have taken the classes and maybe have other strategies that they like to implement that John does or Henry's done in the past, right? Or Bruce, they've been able to use the indicators and still have been very accurate and being able to take trades and more confident in taking trades, knowing that those indicators are, usually giving you very good signals to go off of. So at the end of it all, what I want to leave you guys with is how to leave the guesswork out of your trading with a simple step-by-step plan, creating profits in your account while spending less time in front of your computer, learning about the different strategies in the toolbox, as well as the dynamic duo setup for when to enter the trade, right? Giving you guys that understanding of the dynamic duo of the indicators and having that be a great entry for jumping into trades and the strategies. And of course, right, so if you want to take and sign up for the quarterly or for the yearly annual subscription for this mastery, We also do accept PayPal credit, right? So if you want to break up that big chunk of a payment into 6 months payments for yourself, right? So it's very manageable for maybe, your budget and your, monthly budget and your family budget and everything like that. I completely understand, especially with the whole situation that we're in now around the world. So all you have to do is just add the product that you like to your cart. You can click PayPal credit and you can apply for that line through PayPal with 0% interest for 6 months. So it's a great way to be able to pay it off slowly each month rather than necessarily having to pay that big chunk of a payment. So like I said earlier, the early bird pricing, the quarterly membership is $397. The annual membership is $1297. If you want to sign up, feel free to go to simplertrading.com /recycle. You can go there, or you can go to and call us at 512-266-8659, and sales would be happy to sign you up. If you don't have maybe one of the indicators and you wanted to try and bundle that in with one of the memberships, feel free to call into sales and they will be happy to help set you up with that if that's something you choose to do. So now's the time for questions. I probably won't be able to answer questions for too long because I do have to go take care of my son here in a bit, but I will be happy to answer as many questions as I can right now. So please feel free. How many trades do I average? It depends on the signals, Ben. So some days I will get a lot of signals. Other days I might not get any signals. But it's pretty easy for me to find at least at minimum 3 trades per week. Like I said, just on the profit recycling class that we did last time, with the live trading days there, I think we found a total of 14 trades. And that wasn't to say that we only found 14 signals, right? We found a lot of signals on trades, but we took 14 of them. So you can find quite a few trades. It just depends on, if it's a signal that we want to take, what does the option chain look like for that signal? Does it make sense? But I would say easily can do at minimum of 3 trades a week, right? It's not too hard to find signals or setups like that. And then what trading platforms do I use? I use Thinkorswim and I use Tastyworks. Thinkorswim is actually what I did my $500 challenge trades out of. I primarily use Tastyworks. I think their platform is very easy to use overall. So I like using that one. But it really just depends, what brokerage platform you want to use. I've used a lot out there over time, but those are the 2 that I've stuck with probably the longest in my trading career. And the mastery officially starts today. So this Thursday, I will actually be putting out the first bi-weekly video going over weekly and monthly setups. I'll start looking for trades this week, starting tomorrow for the mastery. And then, of course, our first live trading day will be December 2nd, that first Wednesday after the Thanksgiving holiday. So whatever size account you want to follow your account, right? So as I mentioned in the webinar, I had an account where I used these strategies and I only had $500 of capital that I was willing to invest, right? So you could start off with an account as small as $500. You could have as large of account as a $1 million account. It just depends on what size account you want. More importantly, how much risk do you want to implement when you're trading, right? That's to me is the most important thing. So I personally have slightly smaller accounts, so I'll be trading out of smaller ones myself. But if you have a larger account, you can always build up the contract to size to where it matches your risk tolerance in your account. Marty, technically you don't need any of the indicators, right? Because I have the indicators. So if you're following along with my trades, you technically don't need them. But if it's something that you want for yourself, the main 2 indicators that I have probably on my charts that are paid for are the divergent bar indicator and the compound breakout tool. And then I have a few others on there like the multi-squeeze indicator and things like that. But the 2 that I take a lot of my trades off of are the divergent bar indicator and compound breakout tool. So if you want those, you can purchase them, but you don't necessarily need them for the mastery. And then your options are weekly or monthly, also at the money or out of the money. Richie, it depends, right? So once again, it depends on how much capital risk is out there. If it's a really expensive symbol that I'm taking off a weekly chart like Amazon, then it's probably more of a spread and it's might be further out of the money. If it's a cheaper symbol that I can get further out in time, like Starbucks or something, then it might be in the money, right, with a long call. It all depends on the capital cost. And I always talk about that in my alerts, right? I certainly address that whenever it's the live trading. So it all depends on what the capital risk is first, and then implementing the strategy from there. So I know a few of those came in with how much capital is needed. I hope I kind of answered that for you guys. It really just depends on how much capital you want to put out there. But like I said, I've been able to grow an account as small as $500. So you don't technically need a lot. And no, the indicators do not come with the mastery, guys. So that would be a separate purchase. But like I said, feel free to call up sales and see if we can't get a bundle for you guys or something like that for those indicators out there. If you do choose to purchase them, like I said, they're not necessary because I'll have the indicators for taking the signals. But if you want them for yourselves, I completely understand that too. And yes, the first training session is December 2nd. So we'll have that from 1 to 3 that day. And SC Trader, so all the strategy classes are going to be separate in the store, right? So if you really want to teach yourself how to fish, then by all means, feel free to look at going with the strategy class. But if you want to, kind of taste the fish first, right? See if it's something that fits your trading style and your trading plan, which I completely understand, then maybe starting with the mastery is a great way to go. And then that way, if you're like, I'm okay with profit recycling, but I really want to know more about the overnight profit strategy class, or I really want to know particular about this class a bit more, then that way you can kind of get the class and educate yourself that way to be able to dive in deeper to the education side if you want to. And yes, let me go back. So here's the sign up page, guys. I'll move my mouse, but there's the number at the bottom of the screen as well as the website. And at the option level, you need to be able to trade spreads. So as long as you can trade like vertical spreads and things like that, debit credit spreads, you will be good to go for this mastery. And I can't tell you how many open trades we'll have at one time, right? It all depends on how many signals we get and things like that. You don't have to take every trade. If you start to reach the mask of your risk tolerance while I'm still opening trades, then you might limit yourself that way. But all the trades I'll put out there, most of them are probably going to be alerted as one contract. I'll let you know whether or not I open more than one contract. But the reason why I start off with one contract is because I found, as I've been teaching how to trade options and sending out trade alerts, which I've been doing this for years, it's easier for other traders to follow along and build up their own risk tolerance when you start off with one. I found whenever I alerted, let's say 10 contracts, whenever I was opening 10 in the past, for example, traders with small accounts would automatically open 10 and then they would be fully invested all of a sudden, right? So you just have to figure out the sizing for yourself. And we can certainly talk about that on December 2nd, right? I'd be more than happy to kind of start it off with talking about risk and things like that. But all the alerts you'll see as a one contract trade. So that way you can build it out for what makes sense for your account. And Randy, it depends on how many signals I get on the intraday bar. So some days I won't get a signal to jump into a trade. Other days I'll get, 3 or 4 signals off of the smaller time frames or off the 30 or hourly chart. So it just depends on how many are printing. And I'll hop around, right? SPX is my bread and butter for intraday trading, and I love it because it's a cash settled index. But I'll also go to Amazon. I'll also go to Tesla and things like that to look for those intraday trade signals. So the intraday trades, I'll probably keep more on days where we're actually live trading so we can talk about it and follow along in real time, unless I see like an excellent setup on a day that, a different day of the month. But yeah, well, it depends on whether or not we're getting the signal. And if it's a super volatile day, I might open the room just to say, hey guys, we're doing this now sort of thing, even though it's not technically one of our days, just to get it out there. So that way we can, catch some of those great setups when it's a really volatile day like that. And I do have a learning center with this mastery, guys. So if you're newer to options trading, I do have out there videos that goes over vertical spreads, that goes over butterflies, Those will be probably the main option strategies that we use in this mastery program. So if you're familiar with butterflies, if you're familiar with vertical debit credit spreads, then those will probably be the main ones that we use during this mastery and for these strategies in particular. And no, my dog didn't do anything, Nick, so maybe it was a neighbor's dog. My dog's asleep right now. And yes, Christopher, the trades in the mastery will be different from those I post in the options room. Typically in the options room, I try and just find the creme de la creme. And I'll also post, lotto earning trades. I might post end of the week SPX trades. And with the mastery program, it will strictly stick to these strategies. So unless it's a free lotto trade that we made to hold through an earnings announcement, kind of like I talked about in some of my examples with match and with plug, you won't find those trade setups in this mastery program, right? Those will be more for the options room. And here we're sticking mainly with the profit recycling strategies and the overnight profit strategies for building our accounts. And no, Susan, you don't need to take the class to understand. So in the Learning Center, I do also have 2 really short videos that kind of just quickly go over what profit recycling is and what the overnight profit strategy is. So that way you can kind of have an understanding of what it is when you first see the trade alert come out there. And of course, if you have any questions about those 2 strategies, before purchasing the class or anything like that, please feel free to ask me during live trading days, and I'll be happy to help clarify questions that you guys have in real time. So I'm trying to catch up and make sure I answer questions. How long are your option contracts? If you're asking like what size of contract when I do, I typically, depending on the account size, I'll stick with 1 or several. If you're asking how long of a trade I'm typically in, the longest I'm usually in it for is about 3 weeks. And that's based off the weekly signal, right? So on the daily chart, I'm usually in it for just a few days. At the intraday chart, just a few hours. It all depends on what time frame of a chart I'm looking at for those. And absolutely, I think about strike price. I think it all goes back to risk, right? For me, it all goes back to risk. So depending on what the risk is, usually determines what kind of strategy that I'm going to take. And Mitch, each strategy is a little different, but overall, the win rate ratio for the overnight profit strategy, the last time I checked that was around 80–85% on the win rate. The profit recycling 2.0 strategy also has a pretty high win rate. Like I said, for the live trading, when we did that for the class, I think we took either 14 or 15 trades and we only had 1 loser. So it has a pretty good win rate. I can't promise that every time, obviously, but both of these have really good win rates, which is why I feel comfortable being able to grow my accounts while still juggling 2 kids at home. And on Thursdays, John, those will be in probably after market close because I want to see how the setup goes into Thursday close. So that way we can prep ourselves for Friday's trading day. So they'll probably be in sometime, I would say probably by 5 o'clock. I don't want to promise anything just in case, there's a backup on videos that day. But for those Thursday videos, they'll be in Thursday sometime after market close so that we can watch them and prep it for Friday's open. And really, it's any account size, guys. Like I said, I've used this with the $500 challenge, using this toolbox of strategies, and you can certainly use it with a larger account as well. And if you want the divergent bar indicator, Stephanie, all you have to do is go to simplertrading.com. You can order it off the website, or you can just call in as well. And I totally understand about the meltdown flip for flop. Feel free to repost that question. I must have missed it in the chat, and I'll try and answer it for you. Elroy, when the class first went live, there were bundles for that. I'm not sure if the Profit Recycling 2.0 class is in the store yet, but what you can do is call in, and if it's not in the store yet, they might still be able to give it to you for that bundled rate for the indicators. Aloha, Claire. The strategies work great in any type of market. So like I said, I'll sometimes adjust which strategy I'm doing. I might do more overnight profit strategies during a trending market. In a more volatile market, I might do more profit recycling strategies. But these strategies really work well in any type of market. I will say profit recycling works excellent in volatile markets because you can really, lock in those intraday moves rather quickly with some trades. But they also work good in trending markets as well. So, and Marty, I do have also in the Learning Center videos that go over the divergent bar and the compound breakout tool. So you can learn that from there. They're certainly talked about in the classes quite a bit for the indicator. So the compound breakout tool, in all my classes, I've taught that one. The divergent bar indicator came out with the overnight profit strategy class. So that one's taught in the overnight profit strategy class and the profit recycling 2.0 class. Once again, guys, if you ever have questions about that kind of stuff, please feel free to ask during the live trading days on the mastery, or if you're in the options room, feel free to jump into the training room. I'm always happy to answer questions in there. Yes, Kim, I'd be happy to. So the dates with the live trading days, here you go. There are those dates. And AC, yes, exactly. So in the alerts, I always, unless I state otherwise, I always typically alert it as a one contract, and I expect you to size that based on your own risk tolerance. Because I found that works easiest for both y'all and myself without y'all over investing. Yep, so trade alerts, Mo, if I find some good trades, they're going to start tomorrow. Absolutely. And so I think I already answered this, but the account type that you need is, you just need to make sure that you can trade verticals in it. So if you can trade vertical debit or credit spreads, you should be able to take the trades that I'm going to alert out. And no, Tomcat, the mastery will be separate. So these sessions won't be available to options member. This is strictly for anyone who signs up for the mastery program here, for the profit recycling mastery. And Pokemon Master, Ash, I'll probably be doing that for one of my accounts. And one of my other, my main account, I like to test out new strategies, right? Before I, decide to teach them, because if it's sucking and I'm just taking losses, it's not going to be a strategy I want to teach or alert out to you guys. But I do have another account that I just opened up that I will be using strictly for the mastery and for growing out these trades. So I'll probably be taking these trades in a few different accounts of mine, but in one of them, it will be strictly for the mastery. So I will be talking about how, much I've won, how much I've lost, what that percentage is. And yeah, absolutely, we'll be talking about that throughout the next year. And TBK, yeah, we will trade butterflies. And I do have a video in the Learning Center for the mastery about that. So I think I answered most of the questions, guys. I apologize if I didn't get to you. Please feel free to, send me an email, or when I am in the trading room next week, please feel free to, ask me if you're an options member, or, if you have access to the training room, ask me in there. If you're in the options room, please feel free to ask me in there, and I'm happy to help answer your questions to the best of my abilities, or, feel free to call in. Because a lot of those guys might have answers as well that they can get to you immediately instead of waiting on a email from myself, right? So, and yes, I do plan to try and make it so that for the alerts, PK is asking, will I be able to copy and paste the trade? And I will try and make it so it's from the Thinkorswim platform, so that way if it's copied and pasted over, even if I'm opening the trade in Tastyworks, I'll try and make it so that way you can copy and paste it into Thinkorswim. So yeah, and we'll start looking at trades tomorrow. Yeah, Pokemon Master Ash, that's right. mRNA was the only loser for the Profit Recycling 2.0 class, so. So thanks, guys. I appreciate it. I do have to get going, though. And with the day trading rule, we'll talk about that in the mastery a bit more with the profit recycling strategy. I do, like I said, have a video out there in the Learning Center to kind of introduce how you can get take advantage of not having to have the day trading rules and still be able to take those intraday moves. But certainly we'll talk about that a bit more in the mastery and stuff as well. So thanks, guys, for joining me. Like I said, I apologize if I missed any questions. My email is allison@simplertrading.com, or feel free to email support. You'll more than likely get a faster response from them than from myself, but I will try and catch up on my emails and get back to y'all. As always, guys, for my Star Wars fans out there, may the trade be with you, right? Have a great rest of your trading week, and I look forward to getting started with the mastery tomorrow. And I look forward to our live trading day on December 2nd. So I look forward to talking with y'all then. Bye, guys.